Okay. Call to order this committee of the whole, number 245 for Tuesday, May 30th. Again, I'd like to honor the VWAT tool and acknowledge that the village of Pemberton, that we're meeting here within the unceded territory of the Leeward Nation. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. The recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Any changes to the agenda? None. Move is presented. Mr. Helmer, second by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from committee of the whole 244 from May 23rd. Moved by Mr. Helmer, seconded by Councillor Nightingale. Any opposed? Discussion. Motion carries. We got a few delegations today, so we can Woodruff in first. 4.1, which is from resilience to ruggedization, a roadmap for building collaboration to address increasing natural hazard risk in Cumberland.
He is on line.
You, Ms. Woodruff.
Hi, everyone. Just getting sorted
Yeah.
here.
Thanks for joining us. When you're all set up, the floor is yours. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry I can't be there in person, feeling a little under the weather. So we're all kind of used to this format. So hopefully it's okay. Couple of questions. Maybe Mayor Richmond, you can tell me, can you see my cursor? No?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. And then can you see my notes? This is the second question.
Right now up on the screen is your resilience to ruggedization cover. I don't
Thank
see
you.
your cursor and I don't see any notes.
Perfect. We can make it work. I might point to some things, but I'll use the pointer. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate you having me here. Everything I'm going to talk about today is within Leeward Nation traditional territory. And I am presenting this again. It was recommended that I come back to present this to the new council. So the previous council has heard this already. So there's a couple of small updates, but other than that, thank you for your patience if you're hearing this for the second time. And welcome to the new council. My name is Veronica Woodruff. I know most of you. And I completed my Master of Arts at Royal Roads in the fall. And when I was trying to decide what to think about for 2 years, it was pretty easy. I've had the luxury of working around the base of Mount Meager, which is just up the valley from us. It is one of the most active geological sites in all of Canada. It is a volcanic site, and it was home of Canada's largest landslide in 2010. And since that landslide, a lot of that sediment that was deposited along into the Lillooet River Valley has been mobilized to town. So you can see here, this is a picture from last year, highly mobile sediments moving there. And in the vast landslide debris field, which is about 3.5 square kilometers, all of this is just sitting there amongst our rivers. So this is the Lillooet River where it meets Meager. This is a photo taken from the heat dome in 2021. And you can see how the river's picking up all the sediment that's coming across that debris field. And so this is important to us living further down in the watershed because it's starting to, all of that sediment is filling in the river. So really good work was done by Northwest Hydraulics in 2018 to update the floodplain mapping, which basically assesses what our flood risk is in the valley. And so they did a really comprehensive geomorphological view from the lake all the way to Meager, and then assessed the flood risk for the populated areas of the valley, the whole valley. And so for this chart, I only want you to look at these two columns here. And this is our flood return period. This is what determines how we build in the valley, essentially in the floodplain. So, you're looking at a return period of 1 to 2 years, 1 to 5 years, 1 to 50 years. It's highlighted. This isn't something that's expected to happen every 2 or 50 years. It's really just a probability of how often a flood of that size could happen in any given year. So this 1 to 50 year return period, there's about a 2% chance that this could occur at any given year. You can see here, the estimated flow is 1,500, around 1,540. That flow level is above what we saw in 2003. That was the largest flood on record in Pemberton. And it was a really, really significant event. When that occurred in 2003, that was considered a 1 in 200 year event. So the deposition rate now in the valley is considered 500% greater than it was prior to the slide. And so this has reduced the efficiency and effectiveness of our flood infrastructure. So essentially, creating our flood infrastructure can only withstand about a 1 to 50 year flood. So the probability that we would see widespread flooding in any given year is much higher than it was prior to the slide. And that I wanted to flag the 1 in 5 year flood, so that discharge measurement at 849. In 2021, when we had evacuations both in Lilloit Nation and in the village of Pemberton, that was initiated at flows less than 800. There was some uncertainty around the flood, about the heat dome there and what was going to happen with water levels, but still it's just a demonstration that where we're at today, we have quite a bit higher risk than we had prior to the landslide. And this is because of that deposition that's occurring within the river. What's been done about that currently is the Pemberton Valley Diking District is removing a lot of that sediment. They are taking out the recommended amounts within the populated, the most densely populated reaches between the Ryan Miller confluence and the Green River confluence. So basically where most people, the most amount of people reside in Pemberton. So they are taking about 60,000 cubic meters of the estimated 200,000 or more cubic meters that deposit annually. This is important for Pemberton because population's growing. And not only is the population growing up 32% over the previous census, but the reported increase in residences available is over 89%. Of course, much of this development is being built above the floodplain, but flooding really does affect everybody. So even if your house isn't wet, certainly your way to work is going to be inundated, your way to school. So it is a big concern for anywhere in the valley. And so this is what I really wanted to focus on. So when I was designing my thesis, I thought, okay, how does this work in practice? And I really wanted to understand better how collaboration works. So how, recognizing the village of Pemberton as a small municipality, we have the Pemberton Valley Diking District in charge of flood risk, and we have other government agencies, Indigenous Nation, we've got Lilloit Nation and the regional district. And how does everybody work together to address flood risk? And so my sub questions included understanding where we are today, what some of the challenges are and barriers to increasing collaboration, and then what some recommendations would be. My capstone partner was the Pemberton Valley Diking District, and they were really generous with their time in both helping me structure how we were going to do the engagement and to support the research, and also taking the time to read through all of the work that I had done. So I ultimately hosted 3 focus groups and 7 interviews. And each focus group is different. In one focus group, I spoke to residents, businesses, and nonprofits. In one focus group, I talked to first responders. So, medical, fire, RCMP, social services. And in one focus group, I talked to elected officials and emergency managers. And in each of those focus groups, I really wanted to do this as an appreciative inquiry. So instead of taking the stance like this is all bad and how are we going to fix everything, it was really about where are the opportunities? What can we actually do within our area of influence? And how can we do this in an appreciative way? So not focusing so much on the problems, but more about the possibilities. So, I mean, this is a whole room of professionals, so you've probably all dealt with sticky notes or other kinds of engagement in the past, and I wanted to do something different. I had the participants look, I used this tool called the Visual Explorer from the Center of Creative Leadership, and I had the participants select a photo that represented their understanding of both the current state and the future state in 2 different sessions. So, and then tell the group why they selected that photo. And this actually ended up, I was a bit worried about using such a visual storytelling method, especially just with a science background. But I found that it was really, really effective. And through the stories that people told from their perspectives, and especially when they were within their professional roles, it was just really, really fascinating to get a sense of where people were at in terms of flood risk in Pemberton. So from that, I had 4 separate findings. And these are some examples of the photos that the participants chose and how I used them to develop the findings. So the first one is Pemberton is a strong community affected by extreme risk. Of course, most of you sitting at this table already know that. It was just such a resounding sentiment. I felt like I had to include it because although that's how I felt, it came up again and again, almost by every participant, that it was just such a great community. And obviously we have this risk, and it's also a strong community almost because of the risk. The second one was that there was benefits to collaboration, so more can be accomplished together, and it really offers new and different perspectives. This is where we could have focused a lot of time about the barriers to collaboration, and this is why I chose to take an appreciative stance to look at, again, possibilities rather than just the barriers. But this was a really important component. So recognizing things like the challenges with conflicting mandates and the difficulty in implementing local solutions when they differ from provincial or federal guidance. Of course, disasters, there's just already a lack of resources, funding, and expertise. Everybody's already busy, their plates are full. And risk aversion was a big one, that there are bodies like, engineering and different scientific bodies that have to adhere to standards defined within a college. And in order to meet those standards, sometimes their recommendations are unattainable. And finally, that hazards are just really complex. There are a lot of issues, interrelated issues when trying to address natural hazard risk. And the final one was around communication, and that it was such an essential component of disaster risk reduction, especially in Pemberton. And so this was a really interesting conversation with many of the focus groups, and especially those from the first responders, that felt like this was a really important component. And so this findings table was really something that structured I really love the way that this chapter came out, and there were some really, really excellent stories that people provided that go into much more detail in the thesis. So the conclusions that I drew from that is that collaboration is in fact essential. Through the literature review, this permeates all academic and government guidance in relation to disaster risk reduction, that collaboration is very, very important. And this was reiterated through the focus groups and interviews. Existing networks should work to improve their collaborative capacity. So right now, Pemberton is doing this really well. There is excellent local to local collaboration, like the Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee. where you have all local governments and Indigenous governments working together regularly to understand opportunities for collaboration between agencies. That actually doesn't happen. That seems like it's a really great thing to have, but it actually doesn't happen very often. The next one, that collaboration is prevented by some policy directives. And there were many examples in the focus groups, but I highlighted 3 in this section. Specifically, one around changes to funding models. 2 of them are really around funding models, one federal, one provincial. And then finally, improvements can be made in developing dialogue to improve resilience. And of course, this comes down to structuring communication. And because this was an action research project, I wanted to come out with some recommendations that were implementable. And these are in order of complexity. So the first one is to allocate funding, recognizing that emergency management and communications within official agencies like governments are already really, really busy. And it's hard to do on the side of your desk. When I did the focus groups, SLRD had just come out of a year where they had 121 days of active emergency operations center. So there's not a lot of time to plan for emergencies when you're dealing with emergencies. So number 2, local government should increase collaboration with broader community through engagement. So this is government to community. This is being done. We hosted a weekend, a couple weekends ago with the village of Pemberton and all of their emergency responders, fire, RCMP. It was really great. I think we just, given the level of risk, these things need to happen with more frequency and more in different formats. Number 3 was to define a process in which to harness community expertise. This was described by one of the research participants as going with the existing energy, but with guardrails in place. So there are a lot of people that want to contribute, but when it comes down to it during an unfolding disaster, they're often left on the sidelines because of some defined risk. And so you can see the ranchers at Logan Lake that were applauded for their role in fighting wildfires. And an example of this in Pemberton might be to be designating community neighborhood leads that would potentially be left in the neighborhood that's been evacuated, assuming the risk was reasonable, as part of like a neighborhood watch. These things have to be identified ahead of time, obviously. Number 4, with the Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee, this was a recommendation to consider how you could integrate dialogue with other local agencies. So again, those first responders, medical community, social services, their insights were really fascinating in the research. And I think creating opportunities where that dialogue could happen more regularly would be an excellent thing to happen. Number 5 of 6. So recommendation number 4 was about like engagement and dialogue. This would formalize that relationship into like a community of practice. So how would you define how an organization like the Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee worked with other agencies within the region? And this was the shoot for the stars, pie in the sky recommendation about policymakers should consider a process for implementing transitional strategies. This means adaptive management. Or in New Zealand, they have implemented enabling legislation. So they remove anything highly prescriptive and instead allow some flexibility and creativity in creating local solutions to high-risk problems. So we are in a time where the Emergency Management Act is being revamped. There's a lot of provincial level the watershed management, the flood strategy. There's all kinds of things that are going to be coming down the pipes. And hopefully we are going to see some pathways to adaptive management where we move away from very prescriptive ways of doing business into ways that we can be more adaptive. Okay. And then finally, in my discussion, when I was setting this up and I was looking at all of the different photos, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if someone chose the same photo more than once? This is a Rembrandt, and of the 24 participants, this photo was chosen 7 times to represent the state of collaboration, which I thought was really fascinating. And I did rely a little bit on a gentleman, Alex Steffen, his work. He's put some language around climate change that I really, really love. And he talks about discontinuities. So this idea that we are going to plan for climate change and then we're going to implement the strategies and it's all just going to be fine. He says, we're moving to a time where all of this past experience can no longer guide us to where we're going to be going. So we're in this time of discontinuity. So no matter how well we plan, we aren't going to be able to expect what is coming. And he suggests that we need to, instead of making more resilient communities, we need to ruggedize communities. Seeing resilient strategies as like bolt-on strategies for policies in a system that no longer exists because of this rate of change that we're seeing. And I thought this word ruggedization really aligned well with Pemberton and how we could really invest ourselves into creating the community, addressing the community need in this hazard that's coming our way and quickly. So this ties into some of the provincial and federal initiatives. Again, there was overwhelming interest in working horizontally between different agencies and governments locally, but then when you start to go into the vertical progression between provincial to federal government, it gets a lot more trickier. And one of the participants described this as perfection getting in the way of progress. So for an example of our dikes, we get these standards that we're supposed to meet based on climate change or flood risk or seismic risk that makes dike construction unattainable. And there is no way to transition from where we are today to where we need to be for the future. So I think this is one of the, I'll just summarize this as a parting sentiment in collaboration. If we wait for governments, it'll be too late. If we act as individuals, it'll be too little. But if we act as communities, it might just be enough and just in time. I really love this. I do think that we need collaboration, not just between governments, but between governments and community. And just in case you aren't interested in reading 150 pages, this article in the Magazine of Canadian Risk and Hazards Network came out last week that sort of sums up my thesis in a page or two, if you're interested in reading more. And I would just like to acknowledge the Diking District, who was really essential in guiding this work. I received 2 scholarships for the work. My supervisors, participants were amazing, and all of Railroads and the media that told this story along the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Veronica. That was amazing. Great job. Questions? Questions? Go ahead.
It's a quick question. Veronica, was great. Thank you. But a lot of work. Curious from the municipal level perspective, and maybe this is a little bit naive, but is there a basket of policies that you recommend reaching into that sort of underpins everything you just said there, given how municipal governments tend to operate through policy, and how do we live within how we usually operate, but participate in that collaborative approach?
Yeah. So Jenny, what I heard, because it is a little bit echoey, is there a basket of policies that the VOP should be addressing in terms of where you should put your energy.
Okay.
Right. Well, yeah, and this is the tricky part because it takes time and resources. So I'm sure there's no VOP employee that's sitting around looking for something to do right now and would like to see make the list of policies. And that advocacy takes a lot of work, and the Daikin District knows that well because of the changes that were just made, for example, through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs in the funding trigger. This is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs changed so that you could only be eligible for flood protection funding if you owned the infrastructure and you are a local government. In Pemberton, the Daikin District owns the infrastructure and is not a local government. Similarly, the local governments don't own the infrastructure. So nobody, suddenly, with that small wording change, nobody was eligible for funding for flood mitigation. So over 2 years, the advocacy required to address that, going all the way up to the minister level, it takes time, but it's forced because it's around funding. But, again, all these processes taking place. So, I've taken the time to contribute to the flood strategy, the watershed strategy, like all of these provincial initiatives. It's so important right now for municipal governments to dedicate time to recognizing what the implications may be from this resulting legislation. And there may be advocacy groups like the Water Bucket e-News, which is local government e-News, had a story last week about it's a rural government, BC rural government umbrella group. I can't remember their name. But Barry, the mayor of Gibsons, is a birder who loves Pemberton. So it was his article. And I was like, oh, I didn't know about this rural group that represents rural communities in BC. And I think collectively, working through somewhere like that might be able to take the onus off a small municipality like Village Pemberton and work together under an umbrella group like that to ensure these policies changes being made at provincial and federal levels aren't negatively affecting Pemberton.
Thank you.
Any questions? Doesn't look like any more questions. Monica, thanks again. It's been amazing to follow your work, and it's fascinating work, and it's brought a ton of value to our valley. So thank you. Thanks for coming again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Monica.
I guess, thanks.
Okay, we're on a 4.2 hillside planning presentation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I think the PowerPoint's on Ethan's computer.
There's a computer over there. Positions. Set us up on.
That's on that one.
Yeah.
Of course. Got a copy. And there's actually some like lovely stuff in the little fridge here right there if you want. Lovely stuff. Yeah. Oh, thanks. You're
Okay. Mayor and Council, thank you very much for the opportunity. Many know me. Most know of me. I've been in Pemberton since the mid-1990s. Want to give a little background to the project. It's known as Sunstone and the Hillside area, which involves some other developers that we're working with closely. largely due to the collaboration. It's a unique situation there where developers have been collaborating from the beginning. And we worked through many different jurisdictions from provincial to regional to Village of Pemberton, along with First Nations along the way to try to achieve a project that gives back meaningfully to the community. But how that started in 2004 was first option, but by the time 2006 rolled around, we had some recreation ideas, which then drew the attention of the Sabre Biro property next door and also Lillooet First Nation. So what we did was we got together in 2006. I'm thinking anybody should do that. No, it doesn't work. Exit that. Escape that. No, I did something wrong here now. Let me get that screen back. All right. Been a long time since I did PowerPoint. There's that. Okay, I'm just going to there. Okay, there you go. 2006, we held a meeting, Sabre Biro, Lillooet Nation. And Lillooet Nation was in the process of getting transfer land, which is 400 acres for transfer lands and 400 more option lands above the project on the hillside. And at that time, we all got together and just as developers on our own, we decided we need to do something together for community benefit and development, something meaningful. And that's incidentally how the first concept of Ravens Crest, which is now Sunstone, began. The MOU also agreed to the memorandum of understanding. These documents are all with the village staff. I sent over 32 files in a Dropbox. Farm Road Eastland, best location for recreation, central to both communities. Recreation site is best suited for a pool, ice rink, and sports fields. This is Sabre Biro through Ardenda when we're working together on that. Petroglyph lands will be transferred to Lillooet, all included in that document. We will share in financial contribution towards recreation. The share in common infrastructure costs. So all on our own, a bunch of people playing nice in the sandbox. 2008 rolls around, and this is going to be slightly anachronistic. It's going to go chronological, and we're going to have to jump around a little bit to get the gist. But there's a new memo that was generated for the planning exercise, in which we knew that Lillooet had a lot more land, but they were further off in their decision making on when they're going to develop that. And the MOUs that we developed where we share the cost. And it broke down, they would have been 70–80% based on land holdings, but we broke it down to Lillooet paying 50%, Ravens Crest and Sunstone almost 37%, or a little over 37, and almost 13% for Biro Sabre. Out of that is a raft of documents that came out, which is the Kerwood Lydell water study, the PTO groundwater study, traffic impact, archaeological impact, and neighborhood concept plan, all paid for by this group on that ratio at the time. So not many know that we're all collaborating on that level at that time. Then along the way, with the different initiatives that we're working on, from the boundary extension, we've received letters of support passed on for the transfer lands and Rutherford, etc., for coming into the boundary extension. Support for shared recreation, support for Friendship Trail, and support for the independent school that happened at the time. All of those letters are in that package that I sent to staff. This is, I just picked, there's a couple hundred pages of documents here, but I just picked where they assess the water and how to get water through Sunstone up to the transfer lands eventually for First Nation development. So Kerwood Lydell did a massive study followed by that PTO groundwater study, which really identified the Birkenhead Aquifer as the best water and probably the best option for putting in a well at the time. This little anachronistic jump forward to 2012, full water modeling with ISL. I think it was a $40,000 exercise, proving all of the water hydrology and how to get water to the site, how to boost it to the reservoirs, etc. So now we're going to jump back to 2008. We're collectively working on planning. There's a 90-page neighborhood concept plan, all in the developed fully within the regional district. And this came, and I'm going to jump back for a little bit. We've got right into the presentation stage, very much what you just saw with the bench lands on our sub-area plan. We went through everything from the purpose to the visioning, to the critical paths, to the planning areas, to the smart growth principles, which some people kind of don't understand, hopping over agricultural land to go to a different node of development when you can find that is a smart growth principle, as identified in some workshops. Trails, agricultural, and views, property ownerships defined, developable areas were defined, slope analysis, etc. Land use, phasing, road access and trails all defined in those timeframes. On steeper hillsides, there are the very set paths for roads. You can deviate a little bit, but you can't deviate too much. So we identified all of that, how it connected the two communities together, urban interface right at the rail line. No, there's a plateau and the rec site involved in the school site. And then linking trail networks and growing within the constraints of the topography, et cetera. So this, and ironically, this looks very much like Elevate, because the buildings are black and, you know, what we tried to do in there. This is a 2008 document. We did the full planning exercise right through to the end of the OCP, the whole process in the regional district, coming to a close in 2010. Meanwhile, the boundary extension is percolating in the background at the time. So these are this is 2004 to 2011. And 2011 is the birth of the next iteration of the Sunset. But OCP review is commenced in OCP in the regional district from 2005. Sub-regional planning study, designated urban density, went through the whole process, boundary extension referendum in 2008, that's 82%. I don't know, anytime government's 82% in one direction on anything, but the boundary extension passed at 82%. The Area C OCP was complete in 2009, which paved the way for this neighborhood concept plan. Regional growth strategy adopted in 2010. Neighborhood concept plan completely through technical working groups and the whole 9 yards. We were right at the end of that whole finding exercise. And then boundary extension happened in May 2011. So when that happened, we were immediately thrust into the village. Now, the technical working groups all involved the village through the entire process. So we started with the province with the sub-regional planning study. And they identified that that hillside should have a minimum of 5.25 units per hectare. That's kind of the baseline of, let's not waste the land, let's get it something, but it's super terrain, so let's put a reasonable minimum on that. Through that process, we followed that, and I'll show you the statistics on a little bit later on how, it's not by fluke, but it's how it develops, and it's worked out quite well. So we went through all of these processes, and then we ended up in the village. And at that point, there's so much work done. There's a hillside planning study, status report, from the planner at the time in the village, who kind of summarizes that work of what's going to happen in that area, the commercial, the recreational, et cetera. That's summarized in one of your own planning documents. More open, public hearings, open houses, and then by I think it was November 30th, 2011 is when we received our official zoning for phase 1 and 2 of Sunstone. So going back to the Ravenscrest, anachronistic, it's right in the middle between Village property proper and Lilwat, Montclair at the time. All that happened here at this time was the zoning for the school was in place with the ALC approval. You'll see that the multifamily sites, the lines have changed a bit. Elevate kind of transgresses parcels 5 and 6. Parcel 4 is small lots. That was, by the way, our attempt at our own affordable housing initiative, lost for 200,000. Now that was their 1.8 million. We can't control that. We're actually one for sale for 2.5 million in the now. Again, overlaid over the orthographic, just kind of what the lower density or the higher density on the lower parts of the hill. Here, I'm going to go back for a second. Progressively, as we went up the hill, we're trying to go with lower densities until we could roll over and maybe put more density kind of out of view on the top of the hill. I'll show you that in a minute. Again, this was the checklist used at the final OCP hearings and zoning hearings. Sub-regional plan, OCP, regional growth strategy, archaeological, environmental, endangered species management plan, engineering services analysis, very critical, and I'll get to that in a minute. Groundwater study, traffic impact, NCP, neighborhood developments. Went through this whole process a couple of times in different jurisdictions. And it's a little format, I think I'll make fun of myself. I'm terrible at PowerPoint. So I couldn't change the footer, it's not really a footer, it's a title, but I merged a bunch of documents together. So Ravenscrest exists at the end of this document, and it should have died about 2011. Now, I always look at this and go, we have Village of Pemberton off over here, but the Village of Pemberton is really Industrial Park, Hillside, Rutherford, Airport. Village of Pemberton is a pretty big area, even though it's not a district municipality. But this talked about all of the different major initiatives and how they kind of overlap. And you'll see the little transfer lands, that's the 800 acres. That is, I'm not sure if the transfer lands is actually transferred, but they do have title to at least the first 400 acres. Now, We'll start with recreation. In 2013, there was nothing there. And we originally proposed recreation on the 40 acres of the school going on Ravencrest at the time. Our DENDA said, I've got land, I'll do recreation, you do the school. So we decided to split that off, and we went after the school zoning. We had a couple of school proponents very close at times to building the independent school, a couple of circumstances, 2008 included, changed the dynamics. But we go back to 2013, the village entered into a lease with an option to purchase from the with the Denda family to establish the recreation lands. It's 20 acres of land approximately. 2014, the plan that's being developed out there right now was done by Crosland Oak Landscape Architecture. He did a great little plan, a very high level concept, and he's being built on since. So everything that's on there is based off that plan. There is some more planning exercises needed at this stage of growth. 2015, the Ridge received zoning, and that's when we started doing earthworks in value, in kind earthworks, getting prepared for the soccer coach. So to understand the site, it's a peat bog. Cut off, it's now in non-farm use approval within the ALR. It requires mowing of the trees, geogrid, which is a structural material, then preload settlement gauges and monitor to compress the ground so that what you build on it doesn't move and destroy after. So 2016, the earthworks started in field number 1, and 2017, part of the earthworks for field number 2. 2018, Sunstone started working on our project. We finished field number 2. We did earthworks for the skills park, like that was a fill zone that we did before. And then we ended up doing the earthworks for the baseball diamond, fully structural fill with preload, it's ready to go. And then we did additional work voluntarily, not part of our CACs or anything else, on the skills park because they needed different material moved in and out at the time that they're building that park. And then the evolution of recreation started in let's go back to 2012, and you'll see there was nothing out there. So that's the rock quarry, Parkside would be a part of that, commercial site, rec site. The roads are all in place on the ridge. That property has been in with State of Byro since 2001, I think it was. And then you'll see Sunstone. Sunstone, actually, might be just a slight predate because we did have a logging road a little later than went up the property. So now, doing this overlay once again, you see how the titles block the flash on top of each other. That's my PowerPoint expertise. School site recreation, commercial, parkland will come in prominent on something that I'd like to see happen out there. We throw redwoods in it. We always call it the hole in the donut. Art kept moving land. Jerry Tulloch had the land every time. Jerry just got a little bit more land, because he wanted to do 3 2.5 acre parcels at some point. Now it's right in the middle of the area with all of the infrastructure needed for more density. The ridge went ahead. First field earthworks was achieved. I'm going to blast through some of these. When we started planning Sunstone right after the ridge, we both collaborated on field number 2. We did emergency access in between. We proposed it, staff liked it. So between the ridge, and you can walk between the ridge and Sunstone, but we can open a gate. If there was a fire or if there was a rail disaster, no more rail other than Mountaineer, at one of the rail crossings, you could migrate through the development, open the gate and go out the other way. So it gave multiple access out of there. The trail network was just starting to form at the time. This one jumps ahead a little bit further. But again, Friendship Trail, which is now the Farm Road East upgrade, that we're looking at the trail there, the trail through the rec site. The Friendship Trail was built around 2012 by Sunstone, 2013. That is basically, you can pave that one day by building up the base a little further. It is bomb-proof, it's river gravel. We're one of the biggest buyers of river gravel in the valley. On top of geofabric, 30 centimeters deep, ready to they're building a road on top. Then we get into the actual rec site development. So field 1 is done, field 2 is done. The skills park that jumped into the middle there, we had a couple of practice fields originally on design. I know that the amenities building and parking lot is in the works. The ball diamond's ready to go. I'd like to talk about that on the back end of how we accomplish it. This is how Parkside fits into it. There's a strip of land between field number 1 and the potential buildings on the site. We've entertained and partly designed a play area. Beach volleyball court's the simplest thing, because we just purchased a lot of sand again, and we could actually make that very simply for the community very soon, put that into play. And we jump around a little further. This highlights the Friendship Trail, and I think you've noticed the trees coming down on Farm Road, they're rotten and ready to go anyway. And if you take a look at them, they're ready to fall down. So the Friendship Trail and the Farm Road upgrades, which has been put on our group to undertake, which will have 2 raised crosswalks to go along with that 3-meter paved trail. And now this gets a little busy, but what I want to talk about here is the green line up through Sunstone is a 2.1 meter wide paved trail. I always thought sidewalks are 1 line. It's a sidewalk. It's 2.1 meters wide. You can actually have some active people passing without any problems. And it's 10% grade throughout the site. That green one goes all the way through. Cream Puff is in the middle of this. We are transgressing that. We work with the PVTA. We adjusted our road alignment to their sensibility of getting accurate crossings for them. And it is currently closed while we're doing some road work there. Off to the far right, the dotted big yellow line going through District Lot 210 with the neighboring property, Crownland, is approved by Lilwat, supported by the village, SRD, and 6 and Civic 57 by the province. The 4-kilometer trail, it's about to be finished gravel. We need a little rain to compact it. And it'll be open to the public very soon. Beautiful trail wandering through beautiful forest all the way to Mosquito Lake. Cuts below Elevate, across the tracks and goes up. The Friendship Trail runs all the way out. That's been created. We're working on the right of ways with the village. You'll see where it says Storm Ponds and Community Garden there by the school site. There is an area for school garden, a work machine on the right of way right now. We intend to develop that for the community as well. The reservoir there operates all the residential land. It's boosted from a pump down at the pump station up to the reservoir, back feeds back down. Then it connects into Sunstone and services all of the residential on Sunstone from phase 3 down. Enough capacity in the reservoir for all these pieces that we're talking about, from a fire flow and fire storage capacity. The force main is sized accordingly for the recreation center. The wet well is large, the pump is not as big as it needs to be in ultimate buildup. You just change out the pumps to be able to accommodate it. That's a 2.2 kilometer force main that goes from the rec site all the way to keep going with off-road auto body, what is it now, Summit Collision. And that goes from a 6-inch into a 10-inch at the bottom of the Sunstone, which handles all of the capacity of the ultimate build out up here. Again, the pumps can be sized up, extra large wet well. We have not cheaped out on any of our components here. We didn't do it for today. We did it for the future. The Ridge had to bite the bullet and go first. And they had a very big $10 million servicing cost with only 44 lots coming on. So Sunstone voluntarily worked with the Ridge and did a cost sharing agreement. And over time, we're getting close to paying most of it back, but $3.6 million goes back from Sunstone to the Ridge. And they did their pro forma work, and it lowered our cost by doing oversized infrastructure. You'll see on this drawing as well that the storm ponds down at the bottom, that's built for the entire build out of Sunstone. The stormwater from the Ridge goes into that wetland area with the weir that discharges back out towards the North Arm Channel. That wetland has got a little loop around it. Beautiful place for a boardwalk. I know you've got a boardwalk discussion going on right now, but there are trail networks galore. You can have the Farm Road Trail, the rec site trail that we're responsible for this year, the Friendship Trail, Old Farm Road East that heads back towards Happy Trail and NIMBY. And then you have connections between Dark Forest disappeared. We're reinstating See the Light down between the projects. Moby Dick cannot survive, but we're looking at replacing with Call Me Ishmael, which I can see who read the book. That's going to transgress and connect back into See the Light, back to the bottom. And then we have all the connectivity from our development into these other trails that we're developing. Again, Parkside doesn't change in this, and this is what prompted this discussion, because I listened to the committee of the whole. I couldn't attend it virtually or in person. And there's some of the things that are talking about planning, very comprehensively planned out, Parkside included. And Parkside has in context of this project, I'm going to digress one more second here. from this point forward with that baseball field is for 1.4 million. I had it priced up by Cedar Crest, who's building soccer fields. So I started thinking, and actually the staff planted, can we do the ball field as part of the CAC with Parkside? It's too much for one project. But if we take phase 3, Sunstone, Parkside, pool upcoming CACs, and I talked to the regional district as well, pool that together, it's quite possible we can pull off that ball field with these projects, finishing it. That's take the preload off, reinstate subgrade, and do a full softball, baseball with a movable mound. You can cover both topics is what the price of that. It's about 1.4 million. So we always saw, and that's why we partnered with Parkside, because we saw them as a lead recreation contributor. Go back to 2006, we started this to collaborate, deliver something meaningful, and do development at the same time. So then Parkside, they're also latecomers to the road upgrade, minorly. They are because of their volume of density. And then they're also latecomers to the services. There's a discussion about strata roads. The narrower roads are needed than the village standards to be able to fit in there and get the lots. That terrain, you either blast it flat, do multifamily, or you can work with it and do minimal or moderate blasting to be able to accomplish it. So that's why those roads probably will never be standards. Some of the upper roads, lots will get too shallow in depth. There's an existing road, Saferway, registered onto that site. We're working within the existing road around. It's all been planned for, even in that planning document and the option to purchase many years ago. Parkside is critical in accommodating the road alignment. The hydro guy wires have to go on the property, give up a road SRW for that. There actually is some of the rock removal for the trail encroaches on Parkside, so there has to be permission from Parkside to do that, which I guarantee. And then lots versus multifamily resident reduces blasting disruption for neighbors. It's a difference of several months of earthwork on that site by going single family versus multifamily. And then I came across this in my 100 documents I was pouring through for all this information. Nope. What was labeled on Parkside back in 2014 during the village's how do you say outreach during the referendum. You can read it, it says future residential sites. And that's what was contemplated in the lease at the time. So when this application's been out for 15 months since its first inception, I figured based on the history and the planning, et cetera, that we would have thought it would be moving a little bit quicker because of the land donation and its designation in that document, designation on all of the other planning documents we worked on. So brief Parkside, I don't think everyone's seen this. This was from our open house. I think Mr. Councilor Craddock was there. Applying to rezone single family small lots. That's a brownfield infill project. It's a quarry, rock quarry with intended to blend with the neighborhood, not by not putting too much density right behind it. It's designed to minimize the blasting. There's no environmental or geotechnical concerns, and the homes will all be above the floodplain. As per the last report, I sat in the Dyken district for about 6 years and lived through the 2003 flood. I understand. I'm a strong proponent that we should build as much that we can above the floodplain. All the infrastructure is accommodating. The development cost charges about 140. Parkside's proposing 350,000 in DCCs, which I've factored into that baseball diamond construction. If it goes ahead, they contribute to the latecomers, and it's pretty needed for that trail upgrade. This is right out of the 3-year leasing option purchase. Because of that 20-acre land donation came off the parent parcel, all parkland dedication for that, those lands are covered by this 20 acres that went to the village. And it was always intended in that document, residential and commercial for parcel A and parcel C, which is now Parkside. Product mix. There is small lots. We have a lot for discussion here. You should wrap up pretty quick here. Okay. You know, I'm on Park Clock. Okay, we'll get through Parkside. Full illustrative trail, snow dump, kiosk, everything. This is what it looks like 3D modeled on their homes. If you don't want a parking lot, you go with this plan, we end up with 2 cars in the garage and 2 in the driveway, or park spots in the driveway. If you want more density, we're gonna start dealing with parking. Redwoods in contact. Redwoods is coming in up into the public property. It's 8.1 acres, but if they go with their density, CAC would be 843, DCC 531, latecomer in a couple categories. And when we average all of the density over all the projects, including Redwoods and phase 4, which we're going to get to, it fits close to just above the minimum density asked for by the sub-regional plan. This is again, once again, touching on all that. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Hillside fires of origin, blue is Pemberton, orange is Whistler, yellow is Vancouver. Most people are Whistler Pemberton. Okay, elevated, split's a little different. Pemberton's 25%, Whistler 25%, and Vancouver. We're not moving, maybe 100 people might be living out there. 1,000 people have moved in here and not on Sunstone yet. We started this and they're filling in the rest of the town. There's our elevated block party, 70 people, 20 kids running around playing in the landscaping sand. It's a great little neighborhood and it really kickstarts Sunstone. Now, phase 4 in context. It's 100 acres. It's zoned 5-acre lots. The road alignment is set and we have a development permit. We're currently blasting the subgrade. Access to phase 4 bypasses the neighbors. I'm going to go back and show you something that will avoid headaches for everybody. That green line represents kind of the road counts up there. There are no driveways on there. Okay. There are no driveways on there up until phase 3. There's a handful of driveways in large lots. You will not have neighbors complaining about the traffic in front of their house because I designed it to be able to get through the neighborhood to the upper. We're going to be building that for a long time. We're not going to be interfering with people's lives right in their driveways. So that was an important design feature. It's not cheap. It's the way we decided to do it. Now we have emergency access coming off the top. That can tie into the Mosquito Lake area. That's if there's something at the bottom, we get people out. Trail preservation and construction. We just spent $240,000 building that trail, 4 kilometers to the Mosquito Lake, and we're doing numerous trails inside the development as well. Phase 4 is intended to be mixed use. 1 second here. Up there, we show large lots because that's where the terrain works. That allows for these green bands of preservation of trees below them. And then we have some areas that are more suitable for multifamily and townhome type development up there. Where you cut me off, this is important. The second reservoir on Sunstone goes up there. The first reservoir satisfies current needs. The village of Pemberton Reservoir will not provide fire storage and flows to the rest. Hydrologically not possible. The pipe is too small and the distance is too long, there's pipe drag. So you cannot get fire flows or storage from here to the rec site. Permanent buildings on the rec site will require institutional flows. Institutional flows of 1671 meters per second, which means you have to pair the Sunstone Reservoir 1 and 2 to be able to accomplish that at the rec site. The industrial park, we know it's fully underserviced through, it serves well through Mount Currie, but underserviced in volume for fire storage and flow. It is quite a bit bigger than that. Actually, when we add some more domestic flows in the industrial park, it goes up from 23, 29. It requires a second reservoir at Sunstone, but larger by 658 cubic meters. We've been planning this all along for the overall development of that area of Pemberton. So when we do a reservoir up in phase 4, it satisfies industrial park problems, recreation development problems. Now, it's not all on us, we hope, but we're going to do the lion's share of lifting to get there. The second reservoir, okay, so there's water to the transfer lines eventually. Sunstone has invested $25 million in infrastructure in the ground. That is water, sewer, and it's all sized for recreation and the school and everything. Now, this is what we've done. Community made contributions from the hillside. This is built up without the transfer lines. This is a phase 4 goes ahead on the density we talked about, Redwoods and Parkside. 20 acres land. I came off the rich property in an agreement with the Denda family that obligated them to give it, and they gave it. It was a great gift from them. The 20 acres land is with the village. There's $1 million worth of DCCs, or a couple of phases of closing those are going to be due for DCCs, been paid to date. 2.67 in DCCs overall will be collected from that particular regime of properties. 2.56 million has been donated to date to CACs, of which 875 is purely voluntary. Well, not voluntary fully either. The Farmer Beach upgrade we argued about, but we're doing that one. It's not part of any of the other programs. Sunstone, the Lake Trail, the Friendship Trail that we built, the Rec Site Trail we're obligated to go through, and then we have a community garden pending. We're looking to spend some money to improve it once that gets done. So then we go back to this. The school site is at the bottom. All the infrastructure facilitates that. We basically built the entire band in the middle. Parkside, Redwoods, and then phase 4 are pending. So that's a view from phase 2. That is one of our lots for sale, if you guys are interested. You can see your sports facility in the bottom corner of the Mountain Bike Skills Park. People love it up there. It's a sense of place when you're up there. It's inspiring. And do you have any questions?
Thanks. Questions?
I want to go back because this hang on that slide for a while. We're very proud of what we've done and the work we've done in advance. That allowed those fields to go when the grants are available or the money's available. I'm a strong proponent of getting ahead of the problems and getting ahead of it so then we can build when the time is right.
Questions? Okay. You know, that lots of great stuff in there. Lots of different things at play there when we look at how the rec site got developed, how it's going to get developed, and how we plan for it. Well, baseball diamonds obviously in there, you know, one of the next obvious steps. But there was a lot of discussion as well at the table when we talk about these developments, just in terms of you know, not recreation space, but more like gathering space, more like shady. Back riding my bike yesterday, there was family sitting on the corner of the soccer field because there was a little shade there and looking for grass. So what is being contemplated throughout the hillside area when it comes to, you know, you mentioned community gardens. I'd like to get a sense of how big an area for community gardens we're talking about, and then similarly for gathering space.
So it's about a third of an acre. It's pretty sizable. It's actually might be a little bigger. We're Shane and I are working on the right way, just picking a little bit for the trail versus that. When we first started with Parkside, the staff had asked, can you build a ball field? We're like, too much for one project, but we can maybe put it all together. Before that ball field came about, we started working on, see where it says covered area. We started working on a play park that had a shade structure and maybe a bleacher that would be covered by the shade that watches the soccer area. And at the same time, it could have a giant boulder in the middle with some other areas around that area. So that's a perfect spot for a play area. I know the storage buildings are going close to that, so we have to plan for that. You see there's another play area beside that, covered area, play area, and then beach ball area. I see that area. We're not in control of what happens out there. We can propose it, we can assist with it, we have machinery, we have earthworks, we have money. And whether that gets mixed into the contributions, we've prepaid our contributions along the way and got credit for them. One thing I want to say is the earthworks we did in there is probably 1/3 of market value, maybe a quarter. So the value of that 1.2 million in initial earthworks is probably worth $3 to $4 million. We're averaging $14 a cubic meter, which is $7 a ton. The pit tells it for $20 a ton. So the cost of change, and we've just kept it. We try to stretch the dollar as far as we can. And we do use it from material coming off our site and do the best we can to get as much recreation done as possible.
Anyone else?
Thank you. That was really informative. And I can see that you've clearly cared deeply about creating a sustainable and resilient community for the village. And what I'm curious about though is, and it was great to see all the studies and that I hadn't seen before. So that was really helpful. But I'm just wondering if in your opinion, if you think, I mean, a lot has changed in the last 12 years. I mean, change is rapid. I mean, just hearing Veronica's before this presentation, just, you know, the world is changing. And I'm just curious if you think there is room for just a bit of revisiting on what either priorities that have shifted or values that have shifted in terms of what we can anticipate if we want to future-proof this area, you know, in the next 30, 40 years, like what we're looking at. And if that warrants a discussion or, yeah.
So future proofing. In 1984, after 2003 flood, working on this project, Steve Olmsted from the Regional District Planner, he told me that there's a study after the 1984 flood in the university that said the whole town should move there. That's what really intrigued my interest on going this direction. It's above the floodplain. It's in full sun exposure. It has excellent solar opportunities. It has excellent solar opportunities. It also is so bright that we put voluntarily after we sold our units, realized it's pretty good sun, so again, and sometimes with exterior roller blinds on all of our, went retroactively on our project, even though we're paid for, and put exterior roller blinds on all of the units. That reduces the AC needs in the summertime. They're all step code 4. They're highly efficient buildings. In terms of resiliency, about the floodplain, yes. Water and irrigation is a problem. We were asked to do a common grading program. It's going to require extensive revegetation. That it requires extensive watering. If we didn't do the common grading program, it could have happened piecemealing and might not have got exactly what you wanted in terms of the common grading. But we have cut down most of the trees as a result of the development permit asked of us for common grading. That's going to take a lot of water. So when we're encountering this, and I work with public works quite often, I know they pull water deer and we have water challenges. We looked at phase 4, possibly putting in a bit of a quarry lake at the top that would service as a water system for irrigation and for fire protection, and would not be fed by the municipal system. So we're looking at some of those items. We had your fire department people come by, and I took them through the entire site. We take the fire chief up there every year. We have a water truck. We have a tank on a rock truck with pumps. We have tanks above where we work with fire hoses. We have everything set up for fire. They're very pleased. Smart, great people. Very smart people. Kind of went, good job. I didn't hear from them again. But I used to fight fire a long time. So future proofing. It's an excellent place for solar gang. It's above the floodplain. If we do this parallel water system for irrigation, then we can actually green it up and have a little bit of water protection there. The infrastructure is the best it's ever been inherited. Everything we're doing up there is long term. The pumps, the wet wells, everything we're doing is the best we can, so that you don't have problems for 60 years. And that's what happens in infrastructure over time. So in terms of future proofing, we've done our best. The village has already gone step code 4 on their own. I've not step code 5 around the corner, but there's not much we can add to those elements. That's the building permit process for these people.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I'm sort of looking in a really holistic way in that if you look at everybody's health, you know, obviously the infrastructure is critical, right? But it's even more than that. I mean, I know the heat up there is quite astounding, and it's amazing to hear that those buildings have been fitted properly because, yeah, I mean, as you said, I think actually it was one of the documents that said that the heat in Pemberton is such that our growing season is longer, right? And it's just going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. And again, the world we're living in, food scarcity is a huge issue. Where so community gardens, which in 2012 might not have seemed as important, maybe today with what's going on in the world, maybe they are a little more important. So what I'm sort of getting at is there room for, I don't know, a harmonious discussion about how some of those things can be tweaked together, because you clearly care deeply about this community. And I'm not sure how many, could I say thousands of people are going to be living there potentially one day?
The densities.
I'm actually curious about the overall number of people.
Well,
Not to put you on the spot, I'm just like I am for my own sake curious.
there's 101 hectares in total on that plan, excluding the transfer lines, and at 6.47 units per hectare. You can guess the number, but 650 is kind of that only if Redwoods goes forward with their density, which is significantly higher than the rest. But when you blend it all together at 6.47 units per hectare, which meets the regional planning studies minimum. So that being said, the agricultural land is left alone. The school site is still there for a school or recreation. It's actually zoned dual. So there is a possibility to expand there. There's a 4-acre school garden that was planned. I don't know if it's it would be reasonable to say that we could, I got to talk, we sold that property, I've worked with the owners. We can talk about maybe incorporating that into some short-term gardening play. We're open to all of it. So with Parkside, kind of took me back just at the pace of the application and then some of the comments. And I wanted to give you the background on it. In my mind, I believe that goes ahead, it should go ahead. I've been here a long time. It fits. There's not a lot to be done to it. Happy for input. Phase 4, we're not in a rush. We're going forward. We're coming in with an application for phase 4. I don't think it's best there to be 5-acre lots up there. I think it could serve the community better to be a mixed use up there. Redwoods, I don't disagree that we want lower price point property, and that one will yield that. I've worked with Sasha on that, and he wants to be involved. Everyone's playing nice in the sandbox. We're just trying to figure out how to do this. Parkside is something of what I call low hanging fruit, move it forward, contribute to the ball diamond, etc. Phase 4, we can be patient. We haven't made application yet. We're looking to do that next couple of weeks for phase 4 for the zoning. And there's limited planning input, I think, from this point that would help us, but there's elements that could be added that could really, and we're open to ideas. Like this should be an idea meritocracy. The best idea should right at the top, right at the top. When it comes to the background history, I'd be the teacher. When it comes down to other initiatives, I'll be the student. Because if you give us better ideas, we'll use them.
I'll give you a better idea. Where do the pickleball court from?
Oh, we talked to now right after this. And the golf.
That's the other thing, you have to
We
develop.
have a really interesting proposal from a guy who wants to do courts and things like that, yeah. So, and we're happy to facilitate this.
Shaded.
Yeah.
Shaded. Can I just- First of all, thank you for the presentation, great. You mentioned about the tree removal being a subject of policies.
About the development, so we were asked to do a common grading program. And the common grading program means we have to match the grades of all the lots in relation to the road all the way through. And to do that, put the structural fill and do that, almost all the trees go away. And then you have to put them back, and we're just starting that right now with landscapers. Just look at a little bit cooler weather, but here we are. And there's a bond with a development permit with the village to reinstate landscaping on those lots that we've taken all the trees away. So you will see over the next few years that change. Now, just for example, Alpine, I think she mentioned the Alpine Meadows was a quick pattern. Now it's big trees. When you do something like this, it takes time to come back. And your staff is asking, what are the pros and cons? And the pros are it's all graded, the owner knows what they're going to get, and it's cheaper for us to excavate it all at once. The second thing is the market slows down. We don't have 50 homes going in, we have 5. So those lots are going to not have a home on them, and they're going to be somewhat scarred until they mature back up with growth. So there are pluses and minuses to that program. And in retrospect, some, I think, some steeper areas could be left alone. We left one section of 2A alone, and they're starting to build houses on there, but the trees are still there. The other common grading areas that we did, trees all came down and are revegetating.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much. This was very informative, especially for those of us, or myself in particular, who are new to council. And I will preface my question with it's about housing affordability. And I understand, like, no singular group is going to address affordability. Like it can't, it's not all on developers, it's not all on government. All of us have to work together to do that. But I guess do you see, I mean, talking about Parkside and the additional developments, how do you see this helping to address affordability generally in Pemberton?
Yeah, houses beget suites. You can have a suite in these homes that's more affordable for people than a house itself. We pioneered the RTA zonings, allowing with Ridge and Sunstone to allow coach houses and carriage houses. Now, if a suite is allowed in the house, that gives one more option, but now you're dealing with more cars on one lot. So we have a couple lots, we have some lots with 30-meter frontages in phase 2D. We've entertained a stratified triplex, 1,500 square feet per floor, lower the footprint, and see if that will work. We've talked to staff about that. Maybe a fourplex on those lots, which Providence is heading towards. Parking issues become a problem. With a 30-meter frontage, probably doesn't. There's probably ability to do that. We are very willing to entertain different options. We have migrated out, like cost has chased us to our price points. We didn't set out, we sold our first lots, 200,000 on the bottom. And they went all the way from 200 to 300 to 400 to 500. And that's cost. And I'll say every day that project is not going ahead is a bit more cost on it in terms of the ownership and the finance. All these things add to cost. And so we are very willing to look at some other options. We have some of those multifamily sites, and one in particular that's a little closer down off of Sunstone Way that could potentially be more affordable. Now, that being said, there is the ability for us to possibly do some cash in lieu because it's not a great affordable housing site. There's a possibility for us to get involved in another project in town that we're considering right now. those are things we do want to consider. The golf course, bought the golf course in 2012. And to keep community golf alive and keeping staff is hard. So we feel it. I'm trying to get workers to come here and they have nowhere to live. I wish I had 5 kids. I keep telling them 5 kids, we're gonna have more work for it. But we have 2 and they're both working, which is good. But yeah, so we're very open to creative solutions. And I think Parkside currently is adapting their plan with some options on that. But I think suites are a really good way to go, and homes are needed as well. So supply should adjust price. Demand doesn't seem to be waning too hard. Ours slowed down a bit, but it's still there.
I did notice, I think it's on both the Sunstone and the Ridge websites that there is a commentary about the, it's like the, what's it called? The, Whistler and Pemberton are part of the exemption of.
Yes.
Right, yeah, and I was just curious about, because one of the issues that we've, and Councillor Ramsden has brought up is just, we need to build homes for people who are gonna live and work in Pemberton, and I noticed it was on both the websites that we are exempt, which suggests maybe there's, sorry.
If you take a look at US and foreign. 4. Well, 36, that's in the Ridge and Sunstone.
Yeah.
Very small percentage. And if we look at Elevate, I think we have 1. One. It's not, foreign buyers are not a problem in our hillside in terms of taking away affordability from people.
Okay.
Very, very few. Ours is Vancouver, Whistler, Pemberton, predominantly Pemberton,
Yeah.
and then Vancouver. That's our market.
And you're noticing that, well, this one's Vancouver's the yellow, I can't see the,
That's the Elevate, and that's because it's a strata, the maintenance, they like that opportunity there. Great people at that party, we had a blast with all the kids running around and throwing down in the air and windows blowing sand. So if you take a look, what's the time to make up almost 30% of the buyers on the lots out there. Like I said, we didn't put 1,000 people in here, probably was about 100 people living up there, maybe a little bit more. That's how many people are living.
And I don't know if you have this data, but I'm curious, do you have out of the buyer origin data, do you have any idea how many of the buyers who own the property are actually living and occupying in the property versus long-term rentals or vacation homes?
There are a few long-term rentals. There's only a handful of weekenders. And most people are living in the Elevate product. The homes, again, are predominantly Worcester, Pemberton, and those are people that moved there. So we're seeing a community that's building of residents. I really am not 100% on long-term rentals. I really don't know the number because second generation sales or homes other people have built, we're not 100% knowing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for the presentation, all the information. It's super helpful.
You heard this one on Big Bang Theory? So I think let's do that fast pretty good.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
I'll leave you with the view from. If someone else likes to-
Yeah.
You don't mind?
Oh, there we go. I'm talking about. Okay, I'm gonna wait until everybody going.
But we're done for the whole, but I need to actually close it before everybody runs away.
All right.
We're listening.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna, I think that was last. Yeah, I'm gonna adjourn the committee of the whole. And what's it? It's encounter in 5, so we got a delegation coming in 5 minutes for encounter, so yeah, we got 5 minutes. All right, 2:30 is coming? Yeah. Right on schedule.